Adam from Atlas Gunworks. We're going to do a quick trigger check on this gun today. This is basically a troubleshooting if you had a trigger that was working really well and then it's starting to give you some trouble. Probably most of these things we're going to talk about are hammer follow, but different problems might be caused by the same issues. So first thing to do, gun doesn't necessarily have to be in this state, can be fully together, but we're going to click. I'm going to try to do this as close as I can, but we're going to click and listen for 2 clicks. So I need that first click when it hits the safety hooks, and then I want it when it hits the real hooks. So if I don't hear a snap there, a pretty good click on both of those, then I know I've got a sear spring issue. So this gun passes, click, click, and this gun just came in for a slight intermittent hammer follow issue. So that problem's good. The next thing we're going to do real quick, and I've already done this, is we're gonna make sure our hammer and sear are engaging. So your hammer catches your sear like this. We've got a lot of videos that show that, but I'm going to try to come up in here and hold this, but you should see witness marks on the left and right side right here. It doesn't touch in the middle, just where it catches the hooks. But we just take a marker, just mark across the sear face that engages that top face. You put it all back together and you pull the trigger 5 times, and after 5 times I should see a witness mark, on each corner. I don't know how well the camera will pull all this up, but I want to see that it's making contact. So what we don't want is that this is an exaggeration, but that it's crooked and touching this side and not this side, but they do need to touch both sides. So this gun passes that. So then what are we left with? Potentially these angles are incorrect on the hammer and sear face, but that's not something that's a pretty in-depth thing. You're going to need a gunsmith for that. But this gun, and I've corrected it now, but when I pushed the trigger before, the trigger wouldn't fall. The trigger wouldn't return. So I push the trigger and it'd stick back. And I need it, if it's vertical, and now it's free. So something to keep in mind, this is an old style trigger bow that we used to use. We switched to these German X lines because they're just way stronger. But what happens is when you're pulling on this trigger, a lot of times guys are actually able to bend the bow a little, and there's such tight tolerances in these 2011s that if you bend that bow, it'll start to not return. So problem 1 could be a bent bow. Problem 2 could just be that your triggers fit so tightly and you've got enough carbon buildup in there that it's sticking on the dirt. So you need to make sure, every now and then you check this trigger that it free floats. But those are your quick checks for kind of intermediate weird problems. Not enough sear spring pressure, not an engagement here, which probably requires a gunsmith, or that your trigger's sticking in this case. And we see a lot of these older style bows bend up, and then they cause all kinds of problems. We've switched to these X-line triggers from Germany, and they're way better. But it still could happen, and you could still have dirt in the track, so enough that it stops it. There's definitely a lot of carbon that flows through the guns that way. So that's kind of a 1, 2, 3. Definitely call whoever built the gun if you're seeing the problems with the sear face. But the other 2 things are pretty easy, and then if it is a sear spring problem and you're not hearing the click, this left leg, and we've got some videos on how to do that, you'll turn that left leg up, and that's going to put more pressure, possibly both legs, the center one. Guns like this have a non-working grip safety, the third leg we don't really use. So this returns your disco up, and it also returns your trigger forward, and then this one controls the sear, so you need a nice positive click there. When I set these in the gun, I will usually want them to lay super flat on the sear. I don't want a ton of spring tension on there because it'll come off over time. So I'll put this one together real quick and show you. If we do this without the hammer in the gun, we'll be able to see a little more. Sear and disco in the gun. Leave the hammer out for just a minute. I'm gonna put the spring in, just let it sit in there and see what it looks like. There's a couple of things to look at in the spring. So I want the spring with the main spring on it. Just put a little tension with your finger on there, and I want this part. I want this part here to just sit flat against the sear, and then I need this part to come up and sit pretty flat. I don't want one knot touching with it just sitting in there. So that's the first check. The second check is to make sure we're clearanced on the left and the right here. Sometimes you'll see these sear springs are a little bent and they'll be touching the side of the frame and they'll drag on either side. That'll cause a problem. So then without the grip safety in the gun, we're going to just stick this thing together for a second here. Put the hammer back in. And then we're going to check all that same stuff again, all put together. I like to do this with the slide on because the slide's putting a little bit of pressure on that disco down. Well, we need a little more sear spray. So, again, I'm looking, making sure I got tension everywhere, check my clicks, and so on this one, just changing a little bit of the shape of the trigger bow solved the problem. Hopefully that was helpful. We'll see you on the range soon.